So a little while back, I was told that one of atheism's heavy hitters was Dr. Paul Draper. And so that's probably been over a year ago that I was told this. And so I'm just now got into watching one of his videos that was kind of put on a podcast on YouTube by Emerson Green. And it was covering some of the information that was in an old debate between him and William Lane Craig. And I thought it was worth looking at because it was an angle that I don't see a lot of. And I am excited to share with you some of the falling apart of his argument. So, from the very outset, Paul Draper starts by stating, and these are rough paraphrases. I'm putting them into my own words, and you can look up the quotes. I'll try to leave a link to all that. But it's like, one of the first things he says is, there is no certainty when it comes to metaphysical questions about God's existence one way or another. That is a self-defeating proposition. As soon as you say there are no certainties about X, Y, or Z, you are claiming a certainty. I hope you can see how this works. It's very simple. He is laying out the groundwork that there is no foundation for proper thinking about God one way or another, but then he has given you the foundation. I see this error all of the time when it comes to atheism. So if you want to get your feet on the ground, don't state something that is backwards from the very outset. So I was like, wow, this guy's in trouble from the very outset, and of course he is. And so then he says the best thing we can do is basically assume either naturalism or a belief in God and see what best lines up with reality. And when I heard that, I was like, bravo, yes. Yes, I tell this all the time. I actually just got through stating things very similar to this in the comments today and yesterday. I was telling people that I don't look for a single line of evidence when it comes to belief in God. It's like, if there's not multiple lines of evidence, if it isn't coming in from all direction, then there isn't a God. But it comes in from multitudes of sources as long as you're really looking for it. So he states, let's see what the world would look like, and does it surprise us more if it lines up with theism or whether it lines up with naturalism? I'm going to tell you all day long that the world more aligns with God being the creator and designer of our reality and the consistency of it than not. And I thought it's laughable that this is actually coming from the atheist side of the fence, but Paul's belief is there's no good deductive arguments for or against God. And I was like, man, it is amazing to me that every atheist has the capacity for thought. And they use it to an extent, but they don't fully use it. So most of the time, I spend the volume of my time, probably about 95% of my time, arguing with atheists over the fact that deductive logic doesn't answer everything, and they just don't seem to be able to grasp that. And you're like, well, if you understood what deductive logic is, you know it can't deal with everything, so why would you demand that it does deal with everything? Well, here, Paul Draper is at least smart enough to go, hey, deductive arguments aren't going to completely make the case. You're like, oh, fantastic. Somebody that sees some of the truth. But again, he never looks at the complete picture, and that is the problem. So he goes off into an inductive argument about which seems to align better. And then he gets really irrational with this and comes up with this analogy, which I think is a decent analogy. He calls it maybe the jelly bean analogy. So you've got to imagine there is a jar of jelly beans. We'll say the red jar of jelly beans is representative of atheism. And when I say the red jar, I'm talking about it is mostly full of red beans, but it also has some blue beans and some yellow beans. The jar of theism would be the blue jar, which is mostly full of blue jelly beans, but it has some red jelly beans and it has some yellow jelly beans. And so if you see a pile of jelly beans that someone has pulled out from these jars, you don't know exactly which jar it came from, but the more jelly beans you pull out, you are pretty certain you know where they're pulling it from. And so if you've got a pile of red jelly beans with just a few blue jelly beans and a few yellow jelly beans, then you've been pulling from the atheism jar. Well, I think that's pretty good sense, except that after this point, Paul Draper, and especially Emerson Green, because he kind of takes on the personal wave of it here and begins to state how he sees the world, and just totally doesn't apply the rest of thinking to this. So we get out from under the deductive mode that cannot answer anything. We get into inductive reasoning, which is really good. Let's look at the big picture of everything, which I'm absolutely for, but let's then look at these things well instead of not well. We're going to work through some of the points. He said there were 7 points. I couldn't find the 7th point. It's like it just got jumped somewhere, and I even went back to the video and I'm like, okay, something's just missing here that I don't get. And I didn't listen to every single thought, because at the beginning of the thoughts, I did listen to the beginning of the thoughts, they were off track from the start, and so I didn't listen to the whole entire measure of it because it doesn't seem to need to be refuted. So one of the first things he said was the meager moral fruits of theism. Basically that theism doesn't produce a better morality than atheism. Really? You say this. And I've seen this in other arguments, like there are more Christians in prison than atheists. Sure. There are, Christianity has bad people in it, as bad as, any other religion of the world that you want to pick out. Yeah, but then to act like Christianity in particular doesn't produce good moral fruit is kind of just ignorant. It is incredibly ignorant. It is, you can tell this is the viewpoint of really young people that haven't decided or to study the background of things. So like, where do they think that most schools came from? Where are the majority of schools grounded in, and where did the information age come from? Where did the concepts of freedom come from? And the ending of slavery. I know that the church wasn't as active as it should have been in all stages of slavery, but guess who eventually undermined slavery? Where did the concept of hospitals come from? Who has established more of those than others? What about the best economy? Where did that spring forth from, these ideas from? What about the best of technology? Who is it that goes out and deals with the homeless population the most? Who is it that are taking up for unborn children, who has sympathy on them, who wants to take care of them? Who is it that want to take care of people in their old age versus just killing them off? If you look at the bulk of Christianity, if you look at the charitable giving of Christianity, if you look at how many people have given up one type of life to go minister in a sacrificial way for their entire lives, atheism is not leading the forefront on this, and other religions are not leading the forefront on this. You go look at your other religions and tell me how compassionate and moral they are compared to the overall reach of Christianity. There's no comparison. So to even bring that up is silly. Then he talks about the mind-brain interdependence. Like basically there is no brain, or there is no mind without the brain. Wow, that was stated too soon. I dare you, the viewer, to just go start doing some Googling and look at how much somebody's mind and brain changed when they had half of their brain removed, and see if some of these people didn't come out okay with having large portions of their brain removed, and it didn't change their mental state nor who they were. I'm not saying it doesn't at times, but it has recently come to our knowledge that a man was missing 90%, I said that correctly, 90% of his brain has been missing, but yet he didn't even really know he was any different than any other human being on planet Earth. So this mind-brain dependence point, it just collapses. And then Emerson Green said something about the angle of this. Anyway, with near-death experience, go look up near-death experience. We are collecting more and more information on near-death experiences, and there are things there that you cannot explain well. You don't have good explanations for these things. Then he says that evolution is more provable than, I'm not even going to go in there. I have made enough videos on this to kind of hint at that. I've said a lot of this in the comments, but atheism is believing that, not atheism, evolution is believing that everything was created by accident after accident after accident after accident. And that's not the way other things are created around us. That's not the way other things happen. Things seem to be very purposeful that change and happen. Then he said, the random output of pain and pleasure, just that makes sense in our world that's here by randomness and chaos. But it doesn't make sense in a God world where God made everything. I mean, there should be a reason for pain and pleasure to be marred like it is. I'm like, dude, did you even read the first 2 chapters of Genesis? Did you read the first 3 chapters? It tells us immediately why pain and pleasure get screwed up. God created this place, and then he cursed it because we didn't obey. So now pain and pleasure are screwed up and are not tied to things as perfectly as they should have been. We don't have the answer for that. It was just given and espoused for us. My goodness. He says there is, then he goes off that there is real tragedy. He says there's genuine tragedy. Our world is full of gratuitous evil. This boggles my mind. I don't understand where an atheist is coming from when they make these claims like, what is evil? If you really believe everything is just naturalism and events are just events, but then to say, oh, there's real evil out there. If there's real evil, you're making a point that there's real good. There's a real good and evil spectrum, which is based off of what? And where does that come from? It's not, if it's just our opinion, then if it's just human opinion, then my opinion is that evil isn't evil. So then your whole spectrum is broken. If everything is just relative, you've got to have a foundation point. So for him to even bring up tragedy being real, what does that have to do with anything? It actually makes more sense with what the Bible says. The Bible says that this place was created good and perfect and to bring life to us. But now it's cursed to haunt us and to weigh on us and to bring us down in our emotions. It is supposed to be weighty and heavy because of the curse. I don't know how hard that is. And then he was like, well, then there's religious confusion. And this is, Paul Draper talking, like there shouldn't be any kind of religious confusion. And I wonder, these atheists that are, I guess you could be an atheist and make a really broad claim against theism in general. And maybe you've got a point. There's no clear-cut way to God, and that destroys theism. Maybe if that's the angle you want to travel down. But if you're trying to come up against Christianity, it's very clearly explained. There's God and there's Satan, and Satan doesn't like God, and he lies all the time, and he deceives, and he makes things confusing. So then that would mean what the atheist is perceiving makes a whole lot more sense according to what the Bible says. So I really thought this was going to be some like heavy hitting angle that, it's going to have to sit and really work through. And I love deep thoughts. And I just wasn't presented with any of this with Paul's argument. And I wanted to share my thoughts with you about how awful it really is.